He said, I am Betty Rasmussen. I am the Closeout and Deliverables Officer in the Office of Contracts and Grants, good old OCG. And I deal primarily with the non financial piece of Closeout. So that is things like technical reporting, invention reporting, property reporting, release and assignment, various certifications. But in the end, Closeout is all about the money, and that is Andrew. So I'm going to hand this over to him.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm Andrew Norman. I'm a closeout accountant with the CCO, and everything that Betty didn't mention is pretty much our side of closeout at CCO. So, without further ado, we'll get right into that in this presentation. This presentation is kind of meant as kind of a refresher for campus, whether it's like CCO, OCG, or if you're a department administrator. And just another thing I wanted to say is after this presentation, feel free to reach out to us, to me, to have one-on-ones with question and answer as well, if everything that you came to this presentation for doesn't get answered. So I'll go ahead and move on now.
Okay, the most important thing when you're closing out an award, you actually have to start thinking about closeout at the very beginning. You need to make sure things get set up, you account for everything, you're making sure that you're keeping track of your property, your equipment, that you're finishing up that the PI is finishing the appropriate technical reports, that you're getting proper sponsor approvals. Because at the end, we're going to be looking at all sorts of things, property and cost share and subs and technical reporting and other financial good things.
So the items on this slide, like Betty said, you start with the end in mind. That's the theme of today's presentation. The more you think about during the award, even before the award in Betty's case, in the proposal stage, or in OCG's case, the more you think about it during and before, the easier it is to close at the end. So from my side at the CCO, we're definitely by no means perfect, and we're constantly trying to improve. And another thing that I wanted to say is, we're trying to kind of create more of a cohesive campus with common goals. Sometimes we can be kind of separate campus versus central office, but our goal is to really create that cohesive team so that in the event that a sponsor comes to us with questions, we always have the answers. And I mean, another thing to keep in mind is that a finding from the CCO is better than a finding from an auditor. And any questions that you guys have in order to better have answers prepared, again, I'd like to encourage you to ask those questions to me after this as well. So basically, we want to aim for accuracy during the award. Be aware of the ripple effect. Sometimes when you add a charge or you have to, like, you always have to keep in mind what can happen when you make a change to the award. And we'll get more into what I'm talking about later. These next two points on this one kind of explain it a little bit, but like EPERS and journal entries, PETs, any changes that you make will always have a ripple effect that will be dealt with in the closeout stage. So that's why another reason we're encouraging everybody to start with the end in mind. And anytime you have something to add or make a change, you want to have the documentation and justification to back it up, whether it's in the OCG stage or the CCO stage. So in order to do that, we'll just kind of talk about what to look out for and like what the CCO looks into as well when we're dealing with the financial side of things. That's monitoring general project funds. So your speed type 30, 31, 33 mostly. Um, when determining whether an expense is allowable, we'll look at these four things on the pyramid: the institutional policies, the award terms and conditions, the sponsor terms and conditions, and federal regulations. So as we all know, there's any kind of charge that you need to add to a project in order to reach the goal of the project. But a lot of times, those charges that we add, they can look questionable. Like just looking at it right off the bat, I wouldn't know why this charge is applies to the goal of the project. Um, and when I'm doing a review, or when our grant accountants are doing a review during the award, we determine whether it's allowable, allocable, reasonable, and consistent by applying these four things on the pyramid. And some of the charges, and this was some of the feedback when we gave this presentation last year, is people wanted to know some of the common charges that we have questions about. You always, like, these are pretty consistently seen when I'm doing my review, and our closeout team and our grant accounts are doing our review. We want to make sure that the payroll is matching effort. You want to make sure that it's the right PI, their right team, that's added to their right speed type. PIs can have multiple awards going on at the same time, and sometimes it can be hard to apply the right charge to the right project. You just always want to make sure that that's happening, and when it's cohesive with the effort reporting too. So you kind of have two ways to check that. FedEx and shipping, a lot of time, like, that's one that's kind of a vague charge that's hard to track. But if you have justification of this FedEx or this shipping was to communicate results with other teams at other universities, it was to ship lab supplies, the more justification you have on that, the easier it'll be when we ask questions about it. Unexpected operating expenses, like a lot of times, as we know, I mean, even in your own life, you budget for what you're planning on spending and what you've agreed to spend with the sponsor. But a lot of times you'll have to, like, especially this last year with COVID, there's always unexpected things that happen that the charges differ from what you've proposed. So that'll always be a case where you want to have good justification and explanations, maybe conversations you've had with the sponsor on something that was unexpected that came up and is totally justified on the project, but somebody looking at it for the first time, or without context, doesn't know. So we'll ask a question. And then a couple more are official functions. A lot of times they'll be justified, but they're another kind of charge like FedEx and shipping, where on the surface it's hard to tell exactly what they're used for. So you want to have good justification for those, especially if they're not budgeted for, as I previously mentioned. And then dues and memberships as well. That'll be another charge that we would like to know why you would choose that account code versus just a conference and registration fee. So those are some common expenses that we'll probably ask questions about. And like I said, the more justification, especially in the moment that you add the charge, that you keep for questions, or you add to a database, like that it could be found or communicate with our grant accountant or OCG at the time. The more that you do in the moment of adding a questionable charge like this, then the easier it'll be come closeout time. All right. And then, so this is financial stewardship. These are just kind of more things that you want to keep in mind generally while maintaining a project through its period of performance, its life cycle. So you want to make sure that expenses belong, kind of the same thing that I talked about with payroll. You want to make sure that the correct expenses apply to the award that you're putting them on. Want to make sure that you stay within the budget. You don't overspend as much as possible. And then you don't, one very important thing to add is that you don't add charges just to spend out the budget. You don't want to add any questionable expenses whatsoever, even if you have just $100 left. You don't want to just spend out the budget. You want to make sure that everything on the project they match what we said earlier: allocable, allowable, reasonable, and consistent. Every charge needs to be those things. Don't take any risks, really, is what it boils down to. Another thing to mention is that like those kind of charges, especially added towards the very end of the project, are what auditors target very much. And we recently had an NSF audit, and our university was at the top of the list for cost transfers towards the end and after the end date. That's something that you really don't want to be. That's not something you want to be number one at. So another thing is you really want to make sure that you monitor anything that needs to be returned to the sponsor. If you remove charges, but we've been paid for them, we want to make sure that we know to return excess funds to the sponsor as quick as possible. Or if you have a contract where your department is going to be receiving the excess funds, like a fixed price contract, we want to really make sure that the sponsor is on board with that and knows that's what's going to be happening. So if any of you have interacted with me or the Closeout team, and we ask you those questions, you as the DRA and the PI, that's part of this process. We really want to know that the sponsor knows what's being done with excess funds. You want to make sure that your systems reflect the actions that are taken. Add a charge when it's been completed. Like if you spend in October of 2020, you want to add it in October of 2020 rather than waiting until this month, May. Really just, you want to do things in the moment, and you want to keep the end in mind. I just keep with that theme that we've got today. And then MFIN reports, I was going to say that you could use in order to make sure this is happening, is the trial balance summary and the award report. Those are two very major ones that some DRAs have asked, like which ones are crucial, which ones do you use? And if you ever have any questions on cash, I know that's a big thing that might not be taught as much in departments. The award report in MFIN is very simple layout. It can even be found off a link in the operating summary in the top right corner. I know that's a common report that's used in the departments as well. But really what this one boils down to is everything that we've been talking about. Make sure that you spend throughout the award life cycle. You don't have to, or you shouldn't add everything at the very end, especially things like computers or equipment. You want to add those in the time that they're purchased and really not raise questions for any potential auditor. And like I said, when we come in number one for cost transfers towards the end or after the end date, that's something that we really want to work on as a university, and we've been improving on, if you can believe it. Just try and minimize those, try and get charges in the correct place at the time that they took place. And I would say that's really what this slide boils down to. These are a couple of the specific things that I talked about at the start. Uh, you want to make sure that EPers are always verified and certified. Um, Effort and payroll go hand in hand, and effort is another big trigger for audits. You want to make sure if a PI has multiple awards going on at the same time, that their effort is allocated right percentage wise. If they've got two, is it 50-50? Is it 75-25? Always make sure that that's correct and being followed up with. Another thing not to leave until the end. Same with PETs, with payroll. I know that one, PETs have been fairly common in the projects that I've reviewed. I think they're, as long as you keep them as minimal as possible, that's ideal. I always have backup for making a payroll expense transfer. And then, like I mentioned in the last slide, budget. You always want to make sure that the burn rate of your project is normal. You don't want anything all at the start, all in the middle, all at the end. Really just anticipate what you're going to need left over. And, if you need a no cost extension, that's always an option as long as the sponsor agrees. And that one's a pretty simple one to keep track of overall. Same with tuition. The tuition charges kind of go in the payroll category as well, kind of in the same category. Make sure that it's being added when it's spent, and that's all I really have to say about that one.
Okay, my turn to talk a little bit. So the award is ending. So now what are you going to do? If we were in a room together, which we will be sometime soon, I would ask how many of you in the last week or so got an email from Kathy Phillips saying your award is ending. I've been getting a lot of questions about those emails, and it's just kind of a reminder that the system is looking at these awards and seeing that the POP is ending. And you should probably take a look at all the things that Andrew was talking about, your burn rate or expenses in the right place, just to kind of get your mindset. Or do we have everything where it should be? Now, that being said, my gosh, the award's coming up, it's ending, but we still have work and budget. That's when you're going to want to go to OCG's website and fill out a no cost extension request, and we will process that. But it's very important to remember that if you do need additional time, if you do need a no cost extension, that you go to OCG's website and complete the form. We will not request the extension unless that is completed online. And if you have any questions about which form to use or whatever, you can always reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help. Andrew, what else do you need to think about at the end of an award?
Yeah, kind of the stuff that we're talking about. If you don't manage to take care of everything during the time of the award, and you still need to clean things up, that's totally okay. We're not all perfect, so at the end of the award, we will start cleaning things up. Just take a look. Keep track of all the projects that you have, and take a look when they're coming up towards their end, and make sure that you take care of things in the period of performance, because that is still better than after the period of performance. Do those cost transfers still need to happen? Like we said, if we start with the end in mind, hopefully they're minimal. And then, like Betty said, will there be unexpended funds? Is there still, are you going to need a no cost extension? It's time to think about it right at this same point that you're checking to clean everything up. And then, like I mentioned in the previous slide, any effort or any final purchases that are going to be allowable and not questionable. Like you're not buying everything at that last few months of the project.
And as Andrew mentioned earlier, you don't want to request an extension just to spend down funds. That's not what it's for. It's because there is still work remaining. Obviously, we've just come through this wonderful year of 2020, and there has been a lot of things that were not completed because people couldn't travel or couldn't hire people. And I've seen a lot of that go across the desk. And, the sponsors realize, yeah, you couldn't get all the work done this past year because of all the restrictions. And so we're seeing a lot of no cost extensions, but you do that because you have work left to do and you have budget to cover the work, not just to spend down your funds. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now we're going to talk just a little bit about equipment and property. I do want to let you know that OCG has a property officer, Penny Matthews, and she does do a specific in-depth that has to do with sponsored project equipment. Any questions that you have about equipment and property under sponsored projects, she's the woman that you should contact. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. Okay, equipment and property. There's a couple things we really want to look at. Was the equipment acquired with award funds? Was the equipment provided by the sponsor? This is a big one. Who has title to the equipment? So there's a lot of awards where we will get, we'll have funds to purchase equipment, and sometimes when we buy that, the terms and conditions say it becomes CU property immediately. Sometimes it's conditionally titled. So that means at the end of the award, we need to go back to the sponsor and say, hey, we're done. We have this piece of equipment and we would like to have the title. And in most cases, when it's conditionally titled, the sponsor will come back and say, yep, so you can have it. Or they might request that we use the equipment on another federally funded project. If it is government titled equipment, we have to be really conscious of keeping track of that equipment because we do need to return it to the government. It's not ours, it belongs to them. And we do tag this equipment specially so that we know that it belongs to the government and it is not CU titled. Again, you're going to be working with Penny if you have any property that you acquired during the course of the project. She will be coming back to you with something called the Department Closeout DC property request, where she's going to ask you to list what was acquired so that she can follow up and obtain the appropriate dispositions. But again, any questions with regard to property that's acquired under a sponsored project, please reach out to OCG, specifically OCG Property and Penny, but pretty much any of us on the compliance team should be able to help you. Let's go to the next slide. Fabrications, that's a special kind of property where we're buying pieces and parts to make something new. It requires a specific speed type, and it's really important that all the pieces and parts that are purchased for the fabrication get under the correct speed type. Fabrications are not tagged until the very end, until they're complete. So it's really important to stay in contact with OCG Property and making sure that you're getting all those pieces and parts charged to the right speed type. When it is complete and put into service, that's when we need to apply the tag. You need to make sure that you let property accounting know when the fabrication is complete, and that would be Melissa Keller. There is a specific fabrication form that you do need to complete for a fabrication. And again, that's out on the OCG website, I think, or is it on CCO? It's all connected, so it doesn't matter which one you go to, you should be able to find it. And at the end, if you have equipment, it's CU titled, and you don't need it anymore, you want to get rid of it, there's a disposal form out there that does need to be completed. It does get routed appropriately, and we can determine whether any further interaction needs to take place with the sponsor or whether you can dispose it. Again, Penny Matthews does do an in-depth on sponsored project property, and she's the expert. But we're always more than happy to answer any questions that we can. Let's go to the next slide.
I was just going to add on this one too. Like Betty mentioned, Melissa Keller is our CCO contact for property accounting. And I was just going to add that when you're adding anything property related, it helps to have the PO number in the description line, purchase order number, and that the description line fits the charge. And, like Betty said, anytime that you've got questions, you can check with Melissa Keller as well as Penny Matthews. And they'll be able to help you out, like she said.
Yeah, they're the experts. And again, document. It just makes for fewer questions in the end. We want to make sure everything gets charged in the right place.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we have another one. Let's see. Very important, no property purchases within the last 120 days of the project. I know the POs that are prepared to purchase equipment, if it's under a sponsored project, it's going to be reviewed by OCG Property, and they will question anything that you're buying within 120 days at the end of the project, because by the time you purchase it and you receive the equipment, how is that project going to benefit from it? That's the kind of questions we ask. As I mentioned, we do send out, Penny sends out a department closeout property report at the end of the period of performance. Please complete it as soon as possible and return it to her. If you have no property that was acquired, you can let her know. But usually if you're receiving a DCPR, there was some sort of equipment that was purchased under the project. OCG requests disposition from the sponsor as needed. As I previously mentioned, we do file all final property reports with the sponsor. And a lot of times we have to file a final property report with the sponsor, whether or not we have actually acquired equipment throughout the course of the award. In which case we submit what's called a negative award, but we still need to acknowledge, yep, we didn't buy any property. If we did buy some kind of equipment, we need to report it to the sponsor. And again, depending upon who has title, disposition will be required either from the sponsor. You might have to return it, transfer it to a different project. Government and sponsored furnished equipment must be returned at the end of the contract. And again, very important to keep track of this stuff. Everything should be tagged so we know what it is and where it is. Let's go to the next slide. Subrecipients and cost share. Let's go on. I think we're both going to be talking about this. Okay, subrecipients, a lot of times we will have subs on our award, and I think you're going to have to just click on this because it's going to build one at a time. You're going to want to check the financial and technical status of the sub statement of work. It's the PI's responsibility to keep an eye on the subrecipient to make sure they are completing their what they committed to do as part of the project. They need to confirm that it is successfully completed, and OCG subs team will verify with the department that the work is complete and that all the invoices have been received. Once that's been confirmed, our subs team will go in and close out the purchase order. And the subs teams does send out a sub-award closeout and certification form where we're going out to our sub-recipients and we're asking them the same kind of things the sponsor is going to ask us. Did you acquire any equipment or property? Were there any patents or new technology developed? Did you submit the final technical report if it was part of the conditions? Have you invoiced us completely? and that's all part of the subrecipient closeout form that comes back to OCG, and we file that away. And when I'm doing the closeout of the prime award, I'm looking at those as well. Let's go to the next slide. Hey, Andrew, this is you.
So for the CCO side, this is all about fulfilling cost share. Basically, this is along the same lines as what we talked about for your general spending and property. You want to ensure that all funds and expenditures in cost share are fulfilled, or they fulfill the cost share agreement, just like how we would with a property agreement or your general agreement with the sponsor and how to spend. For in-kind contributions, you want to obtain any documentation for your cost share accountant. So again, documentation, justification, conversations that were had, all save all of them so that you have backup for any charge that you would like to add. I think for this one, similarly to the other ones, what we can all do to make sure that this goes better for closeout as well is make sure that the expenses adhere to or match the budget that was agreed upon, and really just checking in with your cost share accountant through the duration of the period of performance of it. Your cost share accountant at this time is Eddie Castillo, and we'll have a contact page at the very end of this as well, so that you know who to go to for each of these things. But cost share, similarly to the other things, make sure that everything's going right from start to end. Start with the end in mind again.
Okay, now we're getting to technical reporting. Let's go to the next slide. Throughout the project, it is very likely that the PI will be submitting various project reports. DOE, Department of Energy, requires very often quarterly updates. I know with NOAA, a lot of times they want semi-annual reporting. With NSF and NIH, NASA, it's the annual reporting, but there's usually some kind of technical reporting that needs to be submitted to the sponsor to verify what's happening. What are you doing with the money we've given you? What's happening with the research? And I do send out, based on the information in InfoEd, on a monthly basis, reminders to the PIs that they do have various reports coming due. If a PI gets one of these reminders and they don't think that it's correct, they don't think they have a report due, please, don't get mad. Just give me an email and I can look into it. We're not perfect, so sometimes people will put in the wrong dates, or sometimes there are updates to the project that we are unaware of, or it has not completely flowed through to the reporting. I will let you know I am like the last person who gets the notification on the no cost extensions. So sometimes people will get notifications from me about a final report coming up, and they've already filed for a no cost extension and received it. We just have not updated our records. So please, please, please reach out if you get a reminder and you don't think it's correct. I will definitely look into it. Very important that the PIs stay current on their technical reports. The sponsors have been known to withhold payment if all the reports have not been turned in, or if they're not being turned in on a timely basis. The PI should be working on that final report prior to the deadline. The date that I have in the system for reminders and the dates that we get from the sponsors, that's the drop dead date. So very important. It used to be typically 90 days after the end of the project. Now, a lot of sponsors are extending it to 120 days, especially since the update to the uniform guidance, which is now also at 120 days. But again, you really want to check and see what's in InfoEd. reach out to me. I can look and confirm what the date is. There are a number of technical reports that actually require an authorized representative to sign and submit the reports. NIH is one of the big ones. I probably submit anywhere from 10 to 15 reports per month on behalf of the PIs. They need to do the report, but then they need to route it to me for review and signature prior to submitting it to the sponsor. In many cases, the PIs can submit directly to the sponsor. I know that's true with NASA. It's true with NOAA, the foundations, many of the foundations, and any of our industry sponsors. They can submit directly to the sponsors their technical reports. But it's very important that when they do this, they copy OCG reports at Colorado EDU. That will ensure that that report gets into the award record within InfoEd. And when the sponsor comes back and says, hey, we need a copy of the report, the PIs don't have to look for it. I have it and I just respond to the sponsor directly. Kind of, it also takes the weight of retention off the department and the PI. If you have copied OCG on the reports, we will put it into InfoEd and we will take care of the retention. You need to keep all technical reporting, progress reporting, a minimum of 3 years after the end of the project. So again, it's great if you send me a copy. I'll take care of that retention for you and you won't have to worry about it. If any new technology comes out of the sponsored project, it's very important for the PI to work with venture partners on any inventions, patents, or copyrights. They will get the initial reporting in, whether it needs to go in through iEdison or some other venue. They'll take care of that. And then at the end of the award, when I'm doing closeout and I'm doing the final invention certification, I work with venture partners to report that. So again, if you stay on top of things, communicate with CCO, with OCG, with venture partners, at the end of the award, we can go ahead and take care of some of the reporting requirements. I do want to thank the people who have said in the chat that they like the online trainings because they are easier to attend and easier to get to. Okay, I think we have a couple more little context we want to share with you. Is that correct? Andrew, you want to go through the rest of the slides just to show what we have on there? I think you guys have the links within the documentation that Nikki sent out prior to the training. Just some little checklist to kind of keep things in mind, what you need to do at the end of the award. They're all out there. They do get updated from time to time, so always a good place to go check. And let's see, what else do we have? Fabrication tag request, property account code list. All these things are available out on OCG's website. If you can't find something, feel free to reach out. We'll help you navigate to it.
Same with the CCO side of things. You got cost share questions here, but really anything that you would need to find from the financial side of things, we've got on the CCO website. And again, ask questions when you've got them. And then another thing is just as we mentioned throughout the presentation, there's certain people who are kind of in charge of certain aspects of the financial side that I've talked about. Adam Feinfrock is in charge of cost transfers and reviewing those and allowing them and working with you guys to get the proper documentation before doing so. Cost share, like I mentioned, is Eddie Castillo. Property is Melissa Keller. And then for your PETs and EPERs, just start by emailing epers@colorado.edu. That should direct you to Lynn Yang, and she'll be able to help you out with any questions that you've got on PETs and EPERs. Yeah.
So I'd like to thank Andrew for joining me again. to present Closeout. And again, thanks so much to everyone who attended. If you have any questions or if we've confused you on anything or something new occurs, please feel free to reach out because, we're more than happy to work with you, get the answers that you need so you can have a successful closeout of the. Anyway, as Nick